creating academic community partnerships across diverse stakeholders. So who are the unlikely people that can come together to create change in a way that is uniquely collectively able to happen because people come together and can coalesce around issues. And so we've been doing that around disabilities, and that's how we came together with Alexa and PCCS, and she's coordinating many of our efforts in the partnership this year. So I'm here because the work that we're doing is so meaningful, and I have learned in my time in Staten Island as a native New Yorker as well. I just think it's so important that we have spaces where we bring people together, and not for just discourse and debate, but to really ask ourselves, where do we agree, and how can we move forward in ways that create change and health for the community we live in. And so I've done that in a number of organizations over my career. And as this is my 4th year in Staten Island, I've been listening and learning, and I want to be more deeply involved in the work here. So that's what brings me here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much,
I'm
Myra.
going to, do you want me to introduce my colleague?
Yeah.
So I'll introduce Paul, Dr. Paul Archibald, who's also part of the project.
Yes, hello, good morning, everyone. I am Paul Archibald, assistant professor at the Department of Social Work. And my, of course, work with this project is that I am a Staten Island returnee. And so we could define that in many ways. But I'm really, really hopeful, my work with this, I'm really, really hopeful in terms of the work that I'm doing as sequence coordinator for practice, but also assisting Dr. Humphreys with the Diversity and Social Justice course, and being able to utilize this for a place of opportunity. And we'll talk about that later, but a place of opportunity for collaboration and change across the island in terms of equity and belonging. So I'm really excited to be a part of this process, and again, returning to learn all of the different partners, and meeting Alexa and Shamila was definitely a part of that moving process, because I've only been back teaching at the College of Staten Island. This is my 1st year. And so I'm excited as I pass this on to Shamila, who is also an awesome partner in this process.
Oh, Sharmila, I think you're still on mute. I'm gonna just.
Been doing this for months and I still get tripped up. Thank you very much, Paul. Hi, everyone. I'm Sharmila Rao-Tucker, and I am the Executive Director of the Staten Island Not-for-Profit Association. And similar to Paul, I too am a returnee to Staten Island. I'm a native, I guess. Well, although I wasn't born here, I spent most of my life here and left for about 20 years or so, spending time in New York City and Chicago, and returning about 3-4 years ago. Was, I guess, revisiting a lot of the experiences I had as a child and as my family had here. And when I was approached by Alexa and Myra and Paul about this project, both personally thinking about equity and belonging a lot, given the other work I've done, and now in my role as working to build the capacity of our nonprofits and nonprofit leaders, this project became very important to me. And I think to the work that we are trying to do to build community and build capacity to do work around equity in Staten Island. And I see a real role for our nonprofits and our leaders and our community organizers and families and individuals. So I'm really excited to be a part of this and to have all of you hear more about the project from our amazing team here. It's been an honor to be working with them these last few weeks. Thank
Awesome.
you for being here.
Thank you so much, Sharmila. And I do see that we've had a bunch more folks join on with us. So when we get to introductions, as people are typing in, I'm going to go backwards and just go through a little bit more of the housekeeping of Zoom, so that way everybody gets that piece. But just so you guys know what we're looking at today, so we are going to be presenting for about an hour, and we hope to have a bit of time at the end for Q&A as well, and throughout the presentation. But just some of the Zoom features that we were talking about, you should be able to ask questions in the Q&A section. So hopefully at the bottom part of your screen, you see that. And we are recording this so that way we can send this out and continue to share it even after today with additional partners and people that are interested. So we've gone through the welcome and the introductions. Paul is going to take us through the statement of opportunity. Myra is going to take us through the project development and the process and the presentation about our survey. And then we're going to end off with talking about the follow-up, right? What is going to exactly happen, when, how, why, and how you can participate and be a part of this. So the first piece, we really want to be able to get to know you all as well. So if you can type into the chat box, and we'll read as many as we can aloud, but we'll probably, 10, 12, we'll probably take about 2 to 3 minutes to welcome folks with us. And mainly just for timing purposes. So if you can type into the chat box your name, the organization, if you're a part of an organization that you're from, and one word to describe how you're feeling today and what you want to achieve from this session. And I see Robert Perkins. Welcome, Robert. Together Brothers. Denise Lapine. Welcome, Denise. Ted. Enoch, hopefully I'm pronouncing your last name right. Just let me know. Welcome, David Sorkin. Cecilia, welcome. Welcome, Christina from the Staten Island Museum. And Rachel, welcome, Allie from Advanced Care Alliance.
Awesome.
Perfect. Oh, sorry, Paul, go ahead.
No, I'm saying awesome. This is awesome.
I know there's so many great folks on this call today. We have Ruth from Community-Based Leadership from the College of Staten Island, Alyssa Cunningham from Community Health Action of Staten Island, and she said energized and learning. I love that.
Awesome.
Minnie from Empowerment Zone Inc., Staten Island Black Heritage, and she said courageous. Jasmine Rivera from the Staten Island Partnership for Community Wellness. Adrian Abate from the Staten Island Partnership for Community Wellness, and Adrian said feeling hopeful. Lisa from CAMBA, welcome Lisa. Also Lisa Lopez from Chassis, and Lisa said inspired. Leah Graham from Crossroads Unlimited, welcome. Carrie Larson, the Staten Island Dialogue Project. We're very interested to connect with you, Carrie.
Indeed.
Michael Matthews, Director of Behavioral Health Services at SIPPS, anxious to learn. Welcome, Terry Troya. Welcome, Laura from the Parks Department. Welcome, Joanna from PCCS, excited to learn more about this project. Welcome, Amu, one of our partners from Move Forward Staten Island. One word to describe how I'm feeling today is excited and enthusiastic. Awesome. Welcome, Lisa Solomon from Staten Island University Hospital. She's working in hospice and she's feeling grateful. Welcome, Kate. Kate's not part of an organization, but is also a native Staten Islander who returned after 15 years and learning how to become more involved in the community. I love that. Angela Ramos, Office of Community Education, Educational Engagement, and their thoughts are around equity. Tiffany from the District Attorney's Office, I'm feeling energetic and hopeful today. Carol from the Pride Center, Betsy from the Staten Island Foundation, Mary from Adapt Community Network, Emily Tippins from Community Health Action of Staten Island, Chris Marchione, our executive director here at Person-Centered Care Services. And they said looking forward to building a stronger and more united community. Awesome. Well, we have an amazing amount of folks here. And Jacqueline Tacarante from JMT Media, who helped curate some of the flyer stuff with me and share on social media. Jacqueline said, first American minority women business owner in New York City. I work with minority women in business associations, and I'm looking forward to learning about the next steps and finding out more. Perfect. We have an amazing group here today, and I'm sorry that we're not going to get to exactly everyone, but we want to make sure that we also get to the content. So please know that we appreciate having you here, even if we didn't get to shout you out specifically. But we're excited to get started and get into this work together. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul to take us through the Statement of Opportunity.
And good morning, everyone. Again, we're excited at this varied and diverse group of collaborators here today, potential collaborators and collaborators. I'm speaking that. The way that we want to frame this, and we're excited to have this conversation, but the way we want to frame this is not from a deficit perspective, but from a strengths perspective. So instead of looking at when things are, what people see as challenges or problems or issues, we're looking at them in terms of every time something has occurred on the island, we're looking at in terms of an opportunity. It can be an opportunity for us to collaborate, an opportunity for us to grow, an opportunity for us to intervene, an opportunity for us to prevent, or an opportunity to facilitate change. So that leads us into where some of the questions that people may have initially, which is, why the College of Staten Island? Why the Department of Social Work? Well, I mean, let's just start with social work. Our premise and the mission of the Department of Social Work is to really facilitate knowledge acquisition and skills and value development that's really focused on dismantling oppression and injustices. So we really focus on fostering human and community well-being and create a world that is socially and economically just and equitable. So that leads us to, why the Department of Social. Now, why the College of Staten Island? So let's start with the first bullet. Well, you can think of islands, historically are known for really housing what people term as undesirable. So we have the Rikers Island, and then we have Staten Island, right? The forgotten borough. And so we know that the College of Staten Island is actually developed on one of those issues, which is Willowbrook. And so when you think of Willowbrook, these were a group of people who were denied their human right to humanity. And so as an anchor institution on the island, housing and providing jobs for a number of people across New York City, it really serves us well to be the one that helps to facilitate such a project. And so in terms of thinking about it, sometimes people forget about the part of Willowbrook, not just the fact that people were abused and treated unfairly, but that 80% of the children came from poor families. And at that time, poor families were translated in terms of Black or Puerto Rican. And so keeping that in mind, it helps you to understand why there's this give back that the College of Staten Island, the anchor institution on the island, feels that we need to come together and bridge this. And so you can see how that impact of the island really has a historical perspective, but it resonates even today. So when you think in terms of the North Shore, where we have a lot of, we're housing a lot of our vulnerable population. So we look at some of the history and current things that are occurring. 40% of the borough's population reside on the North Shore, but as of June, when we first started doing the count of deaths, of the COVID-19 deaths, they accounted for 54%. So again, there's an opportunity for us to collaborate, an opportunity for us to intervene, and an opportunity for us to really prevent. And again, 70% of the population there is either African American, Latinx, OA, or Asian American, and that's where a lot of our racial disparities and social inequities lie. So next slide. So if you can even continue to think about more opportunities for us, right? The North Shore, the 120th precinct, averaged 775 felony drugs, which is higher than what is occurring in Brooklyn's Brownsville section, which is considered this notorious area. Again, an opportunity for us. And then one of the big areas, right? The I Can't Breathe movement really started on the island with the issue around Eric Garner, 43-year-old Black male. And sometimes when we think about the situation, sometimes people forget about the fact that there's this intersection of race, gender, and disability. The fact that he was a Black, then he was male, but then he was also dealing with experiencing obesity and also asthma, which is two areas that are the most underlying issues that are associated with COVID-19. But again, one of the big areas of that is the fact we again forget about the economic issue, right? The structural economic issue that occurred with this process, which the fact that we have an African-American male dealing with poverty, selling cigarettes, what we call loose cigarettes, what people may call untaxed cigarettes. You know, this is an issue of traveling to Delaware or Pennsylvania, buying cigarettes so that you can sell, because New York tax for cigarettes is higher. So you can sell them for a cheaper rate, $1.50 to make some money. So there's that whole area of what was happening in terms of poverty. Next slide. So when you think in terms of the island and what is our racial and ethnic composition, you can begin to see from that slide, from this slide, excuse me, that we can see that the diversity as far moving from 2000 to 2018, there's been an increase in the diversity on the island, right? So you can see, and there's also clearly looking at the decline in the white composition. And so what does that mean for the island? Next slide. So as you begin to look at the diversity index, okay? So keeping in mind the first slide that we just saw, those numbers, and this diversity index simply says that it's the chance that two randomly selected residents would be of different races. So if I was to go pick somebody from a house right here and then randomly pick somebody from another house, how diverse would they be? And so looking at across the boroughs, you can see that Staten Island is at the lowest at the diversity index. But keeping in mind, based on the slide prior, you can see that although our diversity index is the lowest, it's the fastest growing diversity at this current time. So we can look at it in terms of, while the other boroughs may be flatlining in terms of diversity, the island itself is becoming more diverse currently. So we have a real opportunity, while it's becoming more diverse, to really provide an opportunity to create a lot of changes, collaborations, interventions, prevention, all the opportunities that we're going to be talking about coming together. And that's the reason why this is just setting up the why are we doing this and why now and why at College of Staten Island. And so Myra is going to take us into the next slide to really talk about further, what does this opportunity mean for us as a collaborator?
Perfect. And just right before Myra takes over, I know some folks were asking about the ability to make the slides larger. So hopefully you guys saw Sharmila's comment. Thank you, Sharmila. Just a tip to see the slides and the speaker at the same time. Select the speaker view on the top right part of your screen under the view options, and just select side by side. That'll make sure whoever's speaking at the moment and the PowerPoint is enlarged for you guys.
Thank you, Alexa. Could we move it back to the prior slide before that? Is it?
Sure.
Thank you. And thank you, Paul, for just providing a great foundation for the compelling opportunities that we have in terms of so many different dynamic factors that are occurring on Staten Island. And so we want to just encapsulate that for you and what brings us today in terms of that. As you can see from all of the people who well, maybe not that you can see, but as you can read in the chat, there are so many people who are online with us today that are no doubt part of a robust constellation of organizations on Staten Island that are doing legislative initiatives, advocacy work, educational training, providing services with and for disenfranchised communities. And so this dynamism of activity and advocacy and work that's happening on the island is clear that we have just a wide variety of cleavages across the borough. And it also is rare to find spaces where these convergences happen across diverse people. right? So whether it be community residents with human service executives and leaders and business partners and politicians and family allies and students who are emerging in their leadership and professionals at agencies and organizations, where we combine our collective our networks, our collective intelligence, and we think about ways that we can advance equity and belonging in a way that is uniquely designed for all of the resources that can come together. We don't have a lot of spaces where we can share in that format. And so I think this need has only become more critical as we think about, you know, being in this fluid, COVID punctuated, you know, crisis of health in New York City. And it is providing us, as well as what Paul talked about, we can look at this and say, oh, we are contending with unimaginable challenges that we never wanted or expected, and we're here. And then we can also say, is there an opportunity here to imagine new ways of grounding ourselves, of collectivizing ourselves that we haven't done before? And I'm sure many of you are leading and thinking in your organization strategically about what now. Who are we now, and what do we need to be in this fluid era of COVID-19 in our communities? And your concerns, you know, the concerns in the Zoom room are often, if you're like me, they are way too meaningful and complex for one of us, as I imagine the many brilliant people here online and smart and creative. There's just, even if you have all those things, it's just way too complex and daunting to do on our own. And so this really provides a new opportunity for a different kind of arrangement to emerge. And so if we can move to the next slide, we want to talk about what those arrangements can be and what decisions we need to make, and whether we make them or not, they occur in terms of asking ourselves, what happens when we experience these rapid changes in how we do things, right? Social norms in a community, or who's with us in the community, how people are changing, who they are, what their norms are, how these demographics change in a community. There are a number of experts that have looked at defining what this means for a community when this happens. And so I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like. When these punctuated changes happen, often it produces collective anxiety. How many of you know what that looks like in your work and in your communities, right? And that collective anxiety can look like unconscious bias. It can lead to segregation, isolation, increases distrust. And with that, you know, this happens because we are in the process as a community that is shifting and asking ourselves, who will we become? Who will we become as a result of these changes? And there are experts that have been working on helping communities to answer this question about an emerging identity. And I think it's of value to say that that question is at the forefront, and we don't get to choose that it is. It just is, which means that whether we decide or think we're answering or not, we're answering it. We're answering it with our culture. We're answering it with our work. We're answering it. And so there's an opportunity that when these rapid changes happen, we can ask ourselves, what do we want to result from this? What do we want to result when anxieties come up about what will this community look like for my children? Will my landlord discriminate against me because of what I look like? What will happen to my property value? These are real anxieties and forms of bias that we know. We may not say it, we may not always have conversations about it, but they do inform how people are responding to change. And when we have these forms of fear, anxiety, it leads to distrust. It's hard to trust people. It's hard to collaborate in genuine ways that create robust collaborations. And in the end, it leads leadership. So that's us here and many of the people who are not here, who are leading in organizations, leading on Staten Island in different ways. We, as leadership, in whatever capacity, whether it's informal or formal, are in a community and influencing the story that gets told about change. And we get to influence that story and help people or teach people how to understand that change. And the strategic narrative of change that gives meaning to action and culture can often work to do two things. It can work to break or to bridge. And I want to say that when communities and leaders in communities work in a way that break ties, it makes sense to me because it's a lot easier to break than to bridge. I think it's important to say that as human beings, the machinery of our mind tells us to go with what's familiar, to go with what makes me comfortable. And so it doesn't always happen in intentional ways, but it happens more commonly that we break than bridge. And when we talk about breaking, it's a response. It's a way that we respond that often creates social ties in exclusivity, and that also pushes away other groups who are seen as dangerous or a threat. And so when we're breaking, the result of that kind of breaking in response is that, we often turn inward. People turn inward. They turn inward to their silos, to their specific cliques, or to their specific areas of people of comfort. And it creates fragile coalitions. It creates tenuous alignments, perpetuates oppressive systems of extreme isolation, toxic politics, and all kinds of forms of systemic inequity. And I'm sure that many of you are shaking your head and saying, yeah, I've experienced that kind of breaking. And I've been in that in some way, form, or fashion. And breaking beliefs and behaviors often convey messages that we are familiar with. This is an invasion. I don't know what to do with all these people coming in. And we may not say it, but people are grappling with these fears and anxieties in ways that language themselves. We need to preserve our legacy. Safe neighborhood. We're losing ground, right? There are ways that we respond that are not bridging, but breaking. And again, I want to say that's because bridging is harder. It's counterintuitive. And Bell Hooks says it best when she says that, bridges get, right? And being a bridge is counterintuitive. When we bridge, we actually create social ties that link people together across a sharp division that typically divides a community. So we say to ourselves that the complexity of diversity is a gift and a given. It's here, and there's also some things that we can really gain and learn and leverage and honor about this diversity. And it's here. And it also asks us, when we're bridging, we're asking ourselves, like, who are the unexpected people, allies, surprising partners, unfamiliar co-creators that may be able to do this work in creating
I'm not sure. Paul, are you hearing Myra? I think she might have gone out for a moment.
Yeah, I think she broke up.
We're not, none of us are here, Sharmila, Paul, myself, Alexa, to create this utopian invitation that this is just, we're all just gonna just be perfect and get along. It's really to anticipate and say, yeah, this is hard work to bridge, but it's also worth it. And the alternative is just not acceptable. We can't create community. We can't.
Yeah, I think she might have had a connection issue.
Yeah, she'll be back. So what she's really talking about is, you can keep moving. What Myra is talking about is the fact that we're at this point where we need to decide, okay, how do we want to shape equity and belonging? How do we want it to look like? So as you can see from this diagram, there's the three areas, right? You have what exclusion looks like, and you could take a moment to kind of, imagine that, think about it, where you lie in that exclusion diagram. And then as we're moving into more of an integration, is what people talk about. What does being integrated look like? And then finally moving over to an area of belonging. So it's this discussion of belonging, and one of the things we talk about is that we would need to really come up with a common language and how we all define it. And that's what's getting us into the discussion about the survey, because we all may have a different connotation of what that means. So it's more than just a feeling of being included, right? It's really about being allowed to be healthy and being able to thrive and increase one's that your well-being is not just thought about in times, that it's continuously considered. And so that everything in the design in the area where you are has meaning to you. So you're a part of the structures and the institutions. You're just a real part of that discussion. So when you think in terms of the whole equality,
Hello?
yes, there you go.
Hi, I'm not sure what happened.
That's
I
okay.
just-
These are our new problems in this connected world that we're in.
I started carrying it for you.
I'm not sure what happened. Clearly, thank you. Clearly, my internet access is not bridging well. So I apologize. I didn't know what, that's never happened. So sharing with them about the blueprint, right? For equity and belonging. Yep. What was that? Where is that where you were?
Yeah,
talking
that's where Paul picked up
okay,
on.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you. So, the focus of bridging and wanting to be an entity that can bridge on Staten Island is really what's informed the blueprint for the Equity and Belonging Project. And belonging is a construction that, we're striving for as a community. And when communities foster belonging, they create inclusive spaces that see all of its members as inside the circle of humanity. And I think I want to just share that Sharmila said something about someone in her cohort who shared an insightful realization about the distinction between belonging and inclusion, right? And he said, I've come to realize, it's better to find belonging than it is to struggle to fit in. And I thought that was such a profound way of encapsulating the difference between the two, that it makes a lot of sense that true belonging tells us something fundamental about how groups are structurally positioned within a society and how well and how understood and regarded people are. So it has an affective, emotional piece as well as an embodied piece. It's how people experience us, but how we experience people experiencing us, right? And so when we talk about the path of co-creating and co-owning structures to belong, we also need to address structural inequities that create barriers to full belonging. And so equity becomes, the conduit, if you will, that fosters belonging. And many of you have seen this image on the right that I have up. This is an attempt at understanding equity. It has its limitations. Some people have talked about how it's a limited visual. There even shouldn't be a wall that separates the circle of humanity. And I hear that. What I do want to use it is as a starting point for us to ask ourselves, how can what we can agree on is that the problem is not an inherent deficit to the community themselves, the people, that it's not about their height, right? It's not about who they are. It's within the structures around them. And as a social worker, as I'm gonna put myself in the mix and say, we generally pay way too much attention to transactional solutions. So what we're gonna give, what service, provide, you know, there's a lot of transactional resources being exchanged, but not enough focus spent on the role of structures in actually shaping the inequity that we see in the outcomes of a community. And we need to do that better, because structural forces are really the key forces that shape inequitable outcomes that we see today. So whether it's racial or economic segregation or concentrated poverty, these structural factors are what we need to be thinking about when we think about creating change. So when we're considering racial disparities or social inequities experienced by, you know, POC, immigrants, LGBTQ+, people living with economic insecurity, people with disabilities, how do we create equitable policies that bridge instead of break? And I want us to hold that question. How do we do that? And because that's the question that we've been asking ourselves as we develop the process for moving forward. And the following window is, visual is a window into the long-term process of the Equity and Belonging Project. We are not wide-eyed and utopian in our vision of doing this work. We understand that this is for the long term. We want to continue, and Sharmila has done an excellent job of talking to us about the importance of continuing to seek funding and to continue to seek how to build on this year project. This year in particular, for this year, we are looking to build a network of powerful community organizations, businesses, and community groups that can gather insights, from diverse community leaders, so that we can develop a strategic meta-narrative for equity and belonging on Staten Island, right? So what is the overarching story that we want to tell and work from about equity and belonging, and how does it inform how we lead? And so we want to develop that together, and the project will undertake that in a range of important activities that will be used to create this capacity. And this brings us to the Equity and Belonging Survey that I know a lot of you have been asking about. The Equity and Belonging Survey is a window, an opportunity for us to conduct a borough-wide poll, a public opinion poll, to better understand the intergroup dynamics, experiences, individual identity perceptions. And this is going to include gathering and analyzing new data on Staten Island about attitudes in various areas, including racial, class inequities, disability rights and inequities, immigration, so these are just a few of the ways that we're going to be looking to ask questions, and how those attitudes interact with individual and group identities and unconscious biases, right? What are the ways that it's unconsciously breaking? What are the ways that it's unconsciously bridging? Without any judgment, just for us to see, it will provide us an initial baseline for understanding where Staten Island residents, full-time employees are in terms of the strategic narrative that we currently hold, and where is it in relationship to a meta-narrative on equity and belonging. So how much time do I have left? So Alexis, so I can just—
Yeah, so we only have about 15 minutes left, so we might want to—
So let me talk a little bit about I'll go through a couple of examples of the survey so that you can know we're looking to have a convenient sample of over 200 current and former residents of Staten Island. So we need people to help us with that. We need organizations, businesses, public servants to participate in this survey, because the more people we have, the larger the sample, the more comprehensive our understanding of the results, and the more useful they will be to you and your organization and to your entities that you're working in and serving. So the survey is going to look at 3 areas, and I'm just going to briefly talk a little bit about those areas. It's going to look at community and the ways that people experience belonging through membership, through emotional connection, through getting their needs met. It's also going to look at awareness and perceptions about forms of inequity. And so there's some examples there you can see on the slide of questions that will determine each of those areas of exploration. And lastly, attitudes and beliefs about inclusivity. So these are all standard measures. We didn't pick questions out of a hat. These are all measures that were already designed and have been used across the country to measure these questions that we're asking.
So we do have a couple of questions, and I think it might be good to note sort of here that we are going to be looking for organizations and entities to do kind of a pilot after this of looking at the survey and making sure that it's accessible to the folks that you're supporting and working with and connected to. So we'll answer the specific questions when we get to the Q&A though.
So I'm gonna skip this slide. Sharmila, are you okay with it, given that the time that we have?
Absolutely.
So I just wanna, I know some people are curious about the other aspect of our project this year, but I do wanna say just one thing about the survey. We are looking for people who have the capacity to translate the survey into Spanish, Italian, Chinese. We want to be able to share the survey with as many people as possible. So if there are people who have that capacity in their organization or personally, able to do that and have done that, please connect with us and let us know. Keeping in mind the need for incubating spaces, a leadership where we can actually collectivize our impact together. The Department of Social Work also wants to, this year, convene a space where that can happen. And the Change Leadership, the Public Conversation for Change Leadership Fellows Initiative is a year-long initiative that we are looking to continue to allocate funds for. And this is a model that I want to highlight. It's a very unique model because it's about going farther together. It's not about going faster. And that's important because when we are together, we are wiser together, we are more knowledgeable together. Sorry, I had my camera off because I didn't want to have it buzz off again, but we are wiser together, we are better resourced when we are together. So this is not necessarily about faster, but it is about farther. And work together to create and leverage the knowledge, the expertise, the resources available for a new collective intelligence that can be used to create sustainable solutions on Staten Island. And so part of how we're doing that is we have this PCCLF, and it will be meeting for a year on a monthly basis, and we will be providing online virtual training on practices and tools to facilitate conversations for change in your organizations and in your communities of influence. We also will work together to contribute a collective plan for action for undoing barriers to belonging and secure equity for people with stigmatized social identities in Staten Island. And importantly, we want to create a space where we can cultivate allies that support you in leading change efforts that address inequities. And this is in preparation for developing a strategic narrative that we can cultivate a community of practice of shared language, experiences, and resources on Staten Island. So there'll be an opportunity at the end, if you're interested in it, to find out more about that. Thank you. I'm going to take it back to Paul, who's going to talk about what this means, where we vision and see this.
So as you begin to
think I do just want to give us a little bit of a time check too, because we are at 10:50, just so you guys know.
Oh, I trust, I got this. As you begin to think of what Dr. Humphrey just presented, all that information as far as bridging the gap, equity and belonging, and the survey, and so, and the PCCLF, as you begin to think about all of that, what the goal of this is to really build out an ecosystem of equity and belonging on Staten Island. And so in order to understand an ecosystem, what that looks like, it just provides, again, opportunities is the key word here, always, to build this kind of capacity so we can begin to collaborate, right? It then leads to, if you look at all, you could find yourself in this circle, and if not, we'll make sure that you're there, right? It creates an opportunity for us to kind of create this system of options that's clear and understanding. So we want to kind of imagine ourselves in this ecosystem where also when we build a system like this, it's a great appeal for funders. We bring funders in to be partners so they can be real responsive partners. And when you think of a healthy ecosystem, everyone plays a crucial role. So next slide. So you can begin to start thinking about some of these. So what does that lead us into some of these questions that we may have? How do we do this, right? How do we begin to, that's the question we're asking. That's why we're trying to build this collaboration, because how do we transform systems and beliefs? How do we expand this shared understanding, all right? Who should be the players in this ecosystem? Who's not engaged that should be, and how do we get them? How do we get people to contribute to this stronger ecosystem? And when do you see these opportunities to shift? Like, where does that happen? Next slide. So one of the ways that we're thinking so that we understand, you know, in academia, we always build ourselves on some kind of a theory or foundation. So we're really building on this results-based accountability by Friedman. And so what we're doing is we're starting with the end in mind. We're starting with, how do we want Staten Island to look? If we had all the resources and we had all the collaborations and partnerships that we ever could want, what would that look like? So what do we want? And how do we know, how would we recognize that we've gotten what we wanted, and then what would it take to get there? And so one of the ways we talked about that is actually the language, right? Not excluding anybody. I saw somebody putting that on the text, on the chat. We're not meaning to exclude anyone. If that's not the intention, if it comes off like that, it's an opportunity for us to facilitate change. Do not become upset. See it as an opportunity to teach us something for us to grow. So this is just a framework for us to look at it. As you can tell, we don't really have the ways to quantify equity and belonging yet, because the goal is the survey will help us with that information. So we don't have all the answers yet. We just have these ideas. And the goal is we want all Staten Islanders to feel a sense of belonging and have a clear path to do it. So once we've done this work, the framework says, how much did we do that we said we was going to do? How well did we do it? And is anyone better off? That's the ultimate 3 questions that we want to ask. Next slide. And so these are just some examples, some quick examples that Myra will just take us through as we're moving towards the end.
Enough time. Alexa will share the PowerPoint so that you can see. This is an example of a community in San Francisco who asked their neighbors to share where were the places of belonging, and then they voted and nominated organizations and institutions and formally certified those organizations as places of belonging. And so this happened through a coalition of organizations that came together to ask their community about that. And the next slide is another example of what could result from an ecosystem of equity and belonging. The Blueprint in North Carolina is a network of 46 nonprofit, nonpartisan organizations that work together to create collective impact in regards to social justice and equity across racial lines. And they have done, as you see, some of the projects I put up there, they're diverse in what they have done. To work together to find common ground on projects that they can't do alone, but they can do collectively. And this is another example of what it could look like. What's the imaginations? We're just putting them out there so you can get a sense. Thank you. Alexa is going to share with us opportunities to partner. I also just want, if everyone can give, whether it's a silent or an informal or formal clap to Alexa. Alexa has been just a pivotal leader in our project, and many of you are here because because of Alexa. So we just want to thank and appreciate Alexa for her leadership. And
thank you so much, Myra. And thank you guys. I'm excited to be a part of this. I think as I said in the beginning, all too often the folks that I support and that I care about with disabilities are very often left out of these conversations about intersectionalities that they experience and identify with. And I think that's a great point to bring us where we are here. So I know that how I function is really tangibly, right? And I know a lot of partners that I've spoken to are like, okay, what exactly can I do? How can I be a part of this? What will it look like? And so here's 4 different ways that people can partner with us on this project. And I think it's important to talk about, we may all be at different levels and experiences and ready for different elements of partnering with this project. So there's a variety of ways that you can do that. So the first way is inviting your community members, your organizations, the people you're supporting or serving, your employees, invite them to simply participate in the survey. Share the survey with them, get the word out there, help us network and make sure that folks are aware of the project that's going on, because that's one of the key points that all of the partners that I've spoken to and a lot of you that have joined on the call, and we talk about it a lot, that a lot of organizations are doing this work in silos. And so we want to make sure that we can do this as a collective and have a larger impact. And the second way is to invite your networks to really join us and join other community leaders in sharing, not only the survey, but what's going to come out of this survey and the data that's going to be available after this survey and what to do with that, and then meeting and joining and figuring out what the next steps are. The third way is applying to become a part of the public conversations for Change Leadership Fellows Project. And I'm going to be a part of that training. I think it's something that I could really benefit from in, my early stages of leadership and where I can help and support my community. And so that's another way that organizations can invest in this and say, our organization is going to, allow our employees to take part in, trainings X, Y, and Z and commit the time to invest in that. And then as Myra was saying earlier, and I know some folks were asking questions, and we're going to get to the questions in just a moment, and we'll answer them the best that we can, but that we are also asking for organizations and those that are supporting a large variety of folks to participate in a pilot of assessing the survey to make sure that it is accessible and adaptable for the folks that you're supporting and working with in your networks. And so that'll be there. And I think, so I know that we initially wanted to do a checkout, but it might be best to just get right to the questions, because I know that we have a bunch of those in there. And I see that Myra put the links in the chat box, so that is perfect. And we have a lot of comments in the chat box too. So if you guys can, if you have any specific questions, and I agree, Adrian, there is a lot of collective work that is happening on Staten Island, and we hope to build on that together. And that's why we wanted to, have a variety of people at the conversation today, so we can start to learn more about the collective impact work that's happening on Staten Island and how to be a part of that. And so I'm going to go through some of the questions, and you guys just let me know if you want to answer them live, or we can send out the FAQ later on. So the first question that we had was about how can we bring equity into the Staten Island school system. It starts with the Staten Island youth. There's been experiences of racism at New York High School. And so, I mean, I guess I could take that one. So I think that starts with what Myra was saying earlier about really getting a baseline and an understanding. And that's why we want to do the survey, so we can have the data to say, people that are attending New York High School and in this zip code area, this is what they're experiencing and this is what they're feeling. And then we can have a basis to try to open that floor to address that.
Alexa, just quickly to
Sure.
clarify, I think it's important to say that we know that there's amazing work happening across the borough of Staten Island, that this project is not a substitute for the work that you're doing. We know that there's amazing work happening. So we're not thinking this is going to be a space that's going to address every form of inequity and belonging. However, but it is to provide a network where people can come together and resource and also create that ecosystem that Paul was talking about, that we have a space where we can come and say, this is a concern. Are there other people who are doing this work who can also partner with me? And so creating that space is the primary goal in terms of infrastructure for change.
And if I can add to that, if you remember, one of the last slide of Statement of Opportunity addressed that. That was one of the opportunities where we talked about the fact that there are people already doing the work. So this is an opportunity for those of us who have been doing the work, to connect with some of us who may not have been doing the work as deliberately. So we did address that in the last slide for people who may have come in afterwards.
And so we had a question from Lisa. Does the survey ask questions about sexual orientation and gender identity?
Yes, so it does ask questions, again, in the framework of understanding that forms of oppression and forms of belonging are interlocking, right? So we can't just focus in silo people's identities and their experiences as they move. And there are particular foundational ways that we're seeing that experience, like when we talked about COVID-19 and how there is a disproportionate access and resources and who's impacted. And so we're looking at it from an intersectional lens in terms of disability and economics, class, and race because of what the context is telling us. And that doesn't mean that other forms are not interlocking and that we're not going to engage those realities as they impact people's well-being. And part of that is that practice to think about how do we hold people as, complex individuals who are more than just, right, their disability, who are more than just their race. And so creating a space where we can go in and out in that way and practice that is really important.
And how many questions in total does the survey have?
So the survey, there are some matrices that are, they're one because it's one matrix. So I would say that the survey takes about 20 to 20 minutes at minimum to complete. So it has about, I'd say 60 questions, probably.
And Mary asked, will there be questions related to equity and healthcare on this survey?
Yeah, there will be.
And Elizabeth was wondering, in terms of, like, for the sake of publicizing for some of the resources for translators, are there any pockets or resources to compensate translators for helping adapt the survey?
My answer to that is twofold. One, I think that we can figure that out. We are committed to figuring that out. And I'm also, part of our partnership with organizations is saying, are there people who can, provide this as, in-kind service and investment in the project? So both and. Yes, I think there are ways that we can figure it out. And I also think part of this is that we don't want to lead from a sense of us just providing. We want to, again, begin to practice bridging and seeing how we can share resources and work in that informal kind of bartering way of help and services. So both and, yes.
And I did see, oh, sorry, go ahead, Myra.
No, that's it.
I did see we had some folks typing in the chat box that Snug Harbor was able to help out with adapting it into Spanish and potentially Queens College into Chinese. So I think, there's a lot of opportunity for connectedness there. Yes, Arlette, we will be sending these links in an email and the recording of the presentation.
Alexa or Sharmila, can we put the PowerPoint too in the chat right now? So if people want to have access to it, they can just.
Sure, yeah,
No,
absolutely.
but we can also attach it in the chat now.
Sure. Are you guys able to see the questions if you keep going and I'll attach it?
I can do it. I can attach it.
Okay, no problem.
So I know you're busy.
I just want to make sure that we, so Jacqueline had asked Gamal, I appreciate your correction there. So in spirit of inclusion, there isn't a language Chinese. The primary dialects are Mandarin and Cantonese. Thank you.
Yes.
And Jacqueline asked, is the college partnering with folks that will make policy change? And so I think in reference to our, public officials and legislators.
The goal is to partner with everyone.
And Eric, the PCCF training will be virtual.
It will be virtual now because of the realities, but the goal is to eventually have, we want to do it in person when we can. That, these are some of the unknowns.
Absolutely. And Courtney was asking if we filled out the Google document that was sent last month to join the PCCLF, do we need to fill out the link that was provided today?
No, you don't. Good question. We have you, and we'll be sending out info in regards to when you complete the form, you have the dates, and we'll continue to update people on next steps.
So we had a comment from Kelly that I echo Debbie Ann Page's comment, struggling to understand why groups who have been doing equity work are missing in the format of this effort. That the feeling of the college needing to be, more a part of the community and a part of the projects. And I think you make an excellent point, and I think that's a learning opportunity for us. I think, we wanted this to be an information session for us to learn, what other work was going on out there from a variety of different places. And I hope that we can connect and get to that. There's amazing work that's been going on all across Staten Island in a variety of these areas. And from my own personal experience, being a graduate from the College of Staten Island, I have been invested in getting the Department of Social Work more connected into our community for a long time. So I can understand the perspective around that as well.
And I want to respond to that too. What we're asking is for people to come to this in terms of opportunities. And what I saw in some of the question is, it seems like people are feeling like, okay, we have this CSI who is struggling with diversity issues themselves, saying they're leading this. And so if you saw the initial, and Alexa did a really good job of the initial call out, and none of this is based on funding or grant. We're not getting any funding or grant that has led us. Actually, we was doing some of this work in the social work department prior to us even beginning to move in. Think about, we were already moving in this realm with this work that we were doing. So we're asking people who have been doing the work to partner. It's a growth opportunity, and it's okay to have your feelings of frustrations and anger and all those things, because I'm sharing those myself. What I'm saying is bring that to the table with an open mind to share some of the work that you're already doing so that we can partner together. We are not framing the discussion, okay? We're trying to get all of us to frame the discussion. We're starting the discussion. And we're asking all of us to frame it. That's why I say, if you notice, we didn't have any, it was questions. And what are those benchmarks? What are those? We were just giving you just to get people to start talking together and not separately. That's what we're trying to do. That's the attempt. And it's a mandate for a Department of Social Work, not just for a CSI, but it's the mandate of the Department of Social Work. And that's what we're doing. So I'm asking you to bring your frustrations and bring them, but bring them in a way that's meaningful for us to move forward.
Absolutely. And I think that that's how, that's how I saw my role in a lot of this project, was trying to be a community connector of sorts and reach out to, contacts or colleagues that I've met over time, and all the amazing work that everybody has been doing, and making sure that, we tried to get as much outreach as we could to have everybody a part of this discussion, so we could make sure that those pieces aren't left out. And Kelly said that many libraries on Staten Island have been leading community conversations, and they'd be happy to execute more of these types of programs. That would be awesome.
Great.
Perfect. So I think that's where we are leaving off now. And I do see that there are, comments and feedback in the chat box and in the questions, and we'll do our best to get the FAQ out to everybody for anything that we might have not been able to answer. Sharmila, did you want to touch on some?
Just 2 points. I've watched some of the comments come through the chat box Q&A, and to me personally via email or text. And I want to say that this is a learning journey. I know, and I recognize as someone, being new back to Staten Island, I am aware of the many collective efforts that have been pursued over the last several years around equity. And I want to certainly acknowledge those and agree with my fellow presenters, or I was a listener mostly, that this is not only continuing the work that everyone has been doing and building awareness and learning together, but we are hopeful for action and change. And, Dr. Humphreys used a quote I use often about going further together. The other is change moves at the speed of trust. And I really look forward to what we're building, because not that the attempts and the work that's happened hasn't brought about a lot of change. I think I've heard about it and I've seen it, and I'm looking forward to expanding and broadening that work. For those of you that work at nonprofits and are feeling a lot of pressure right now to just keep your doors open and keep your staff and keep providing the services and programs you are, we understand that this work seems extra, above and beyond. And I want to share just a moment, that is the point of this work. It has to be built into what we're doing. Our programs, our services, our funding, our advocacy, it must be done with this lens of equity and justice for all of our communities. And I am hopeful that through these conversations and through the expansive work that I'm seeing in the chat and that we all want to do, we will make that movement happen and build the kind of community I think many of us have been talking about for some time. So thank you for joining us, and look forward to what's to come.
I really think that we hope that people can keep in mind that metaphor of a bridge, that this is really about us creating a way of transacting together. How do we do that? How do we create those bridges? So in our language, just come with your frustrations, come with your challenge. I'm the first to say and be openly critical about the limitations within academic institutions and how that works. And come with a sense of hope about bridging. We can do this differently. And we can only do this if we begin to, like I said, practice trusting and doing things together in small ways, so that the big things we can do together. Because all too often we move right to the big things without the trust, and that's why it deteriorates, because there isn't any circle of belonging to incubate it. And so we really want to make sure that we do that foundational hard work so that this is sustainable. I don't want people burning out like I've seen in this work. I don't want to see people, just getting sick. We need a network. We need a place where we can come together and leverage.
For sure. And we do, Terry, I'd love to follow up with you about your comment about the, so Terry Troya from Project Hospitality is saying, I volunteer with Communities United for Respect and Trust, and we're having our 16th annual Anti-Bias Solution Making Summit October 17th and 18th. This year it'll be virtual. I would love to recommend doing a virtual workshop on this project for that. And yeah, I definitely hope we can connect around that for sure. Perfect. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us today and giving your feedback. And, you know, we hope that we can continue to collaborate together and have discussions and continue the conversation and the action.
Just Alexa, one point, a last call for action is the focus group we'd like to create to test the survey. The link is in the chat. It's also in the slide deck that Alexa will send out and also dropped into the chat. I think that's an immediate action item in addition to the application for the fellows program.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you so much all. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.